We're so happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just want to start by asking how you're doing, and how you've been doing with the pandemic, perhaps in general, but maybe more specifically, like with writing, and how that might have affected your process.
Well, it recalibrated my process, because I'm used to, I'm a writer. I'm used to being at home. I wake up, I write, for a certain amount of hours, and I had been for the last few years working on a one or more television shows, but mostly Snowfall, here there in Los Angeles, and so going into a writer's room every day really kind of threw me off balance. And so when the pandemic happened, I was, I was in my house. If I met with anybody about writing, it was on Zoom, and it was usually later in the day. So the early morning could be used for writing. And I did that. I come out with a couple of books. So, and being alone in a place and writing every day, and, some drawing, which I do, has been, kind of easy. So it's been great. And also I have all these jobs, and they're all writing jobs. And so I'm working more, sometimes happily, sometimes unhappily, there's a lot to do. And so it's been okay. It's hard, I think, for a lot of people, either their emotional natures, or the fact that they're not making enough money, they're worried about losing their house, all that stuff. I feel very strongly about those things, but it hasn't happened to me, which is, I'm not unhappy about.
Right. It's interesting because there are a lot of us who, I think the adjustments and the changes have been huge for everybody in some fashion or another. Mm-hmm. But some people have obviously had a larger share of hardships than others, and so having the ability to be able to have a career where you can keep going is, it makes one really fortunate. So
it's kind of like the blacklist in Hollywood. If you were an actor and you got blacklisted, that was it. You couldn't act. You couldn't, because you couldn't be anywhere. But if you're a writer, you could hide behind another writer and keep writing stories and keep getting paid for them. It's funny for some people, but this is America, and so the people who have the hardest are lost a job, tried to be kicked out of their apartment, don't have any money, and so living with a whole bunch of people, not living with those people, and then of course much more likely to get COVID, and it goes on. It's a tumble down effect, and it's really awful.
And things tend to be hardest on people for whom things are already hard.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. I've been in Los Angeles, for most of that time. But where I was in the beach community of Santa Monica, and it was okay. I know that there are parts of LA that were much worse, and and there are parts of America that are much worse, whether people recognize it or not. Still 530,000 people have died, and that's a lot of people, and it's a big impact. And I keep thinking, I really love, the new administration and what they're doing, and how they're, giving money, doing things, but it's really important. The thing I learned, I think a lot of people learn, is it's really important for us to help who we can, how we can, because, it's Americans that are going to make this thing through, not the American government, but, Americans themselves, to help people who need the help, and it's okay if it's only people and like, but let's all, help people we know and like, and, and just to feel better, just to make it a more positive, motion.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I think it doesn't necessarily even have to be a huge thing. If if each of us sort of does what we can, and
Yeah.
and you do feel better when you help, in addition to helping other people.
Right, and they feel better too.
Exactly, they absolutely do.
Like, it goes well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for saying that. So you mentioned all of the jobs you have, and we are going to get into Easy Rawlins in the book, but you mentioned all the jobs you have, and I would like to hear, and I think our audience would like to hear a little bit about some of the other irons you have in the fire as well, because it would be enough if you were regularly putting out novels that people love to read, but that's not all you're doing.
No, it's not, which I guess is good. Right now I'm in Atlanta, and I'm in Atlanta with Apple Television because we've made a mini series out of my book, The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray, and starring Sam Jackson. And we're just about to start shooting it. I think next week, or we're going to actually be shooting it. Right now it's pre-production, and so I'm finishing off that script, working with a friend of mine, a really good television writer, Jerome Hairston, and then so I'm doing that, and also I'm working with Taylor Hackford, also with Apple TV, trying to get to come up with another miniseries about the life of Louis Armstrong. Who's singing, really? I mean, he is jazz. I mean, it's not even a joke. It's not hyperbole. He is jazz, and everything, from swing on. And so, I'm doing that, and also, I've been working on the show Snowfall forever. And I still am, since the beginning, and so that'll start in another month and a half or so. And I spend there are a couple of other small things that I've done that have really been enjoyable and fun. And I had the new Easy Rawlins book, which of course I'm very happy about. And sometime I finally got out a true collection of short stories that I really like, The Awkward Black Man. Talking about those Black male heroes who don't usually appear in any part of American culture, in literature, on television, and newspaper articles. There's another, or quite a few other guys who could be talked about. Who might be a little awkward and a little nerdy and a little different and a little obsessed. But so I wrote that collection of stories too, and I was very happy with it.
Yeah, and it's a great collection. It just came out last year, and I'll go ahead and say that folks can pick it up at Malaprops as well. Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the new book a little bit, and about Easy Rawlins. So the 30th anniversary of the first book, of Devil in a Blue Dress, just happened. And so then the clear question is, what has that 30 years been like for you writing the character? How you, if there are changes in how you write the character, see the character, live with the character, and then of course how the character, without giving spoilers, obviously, how the character has changed in that span of the novels.
I think it's almost impossible to do a spoiler in Blood Grove. So I mean, I don't mind talking about it. I think that the changes in Easy Rawlins are vast. What part of the changes, of course, me. I started writing Easy. My first book was published about him when I was 38. Now I'm 69. So that's a big thing. Easy, the stories themselves go over years. The very first Easy Rawlins novel, which wasn't a mystery, Gone Fishing, happens in 1939. It wasn't the first novel published, but it's the first one I wrote about him. And then Devil in a Blue Dress is in 48, and then we jump into the 50s, and then to the 60s, going slower, but things are still moving forward. So Easy's always different because the world around him is always different, and Los Angeles changes so much because of its population. Also, Easy is getting older. So, Easy, starts off, he's in his late 20s well, actually he's 19 in the first book, but then he's in his late 20s. And so now he's 49. That's, it's really a different guy in a different world. Another thing which I was thinking of lately, some people have friends that, they have friends because they want to stay the same. Mm-hmm. And some people have a relationship to the world where they're always changing, and the people they know are changing, or maybe they stop knowing them. And, Easy's friends, are all really changing radically. Mouse he's reading books. He has a new girlfriend who is, a Viet Cong mechanic, who's, escaped Vietnam and come to America. Jackson Blue is a major, force in American business and also in computer technology. So his world is changing, and his perception of the world is changing, and talking to his friends, makes him different. Of course, he's living in a very different place that I love. Leave him there forever. It's just such a great place,
So the other piece about, you mentioned how he's changing, obviously he's aging, growing, people around him are changing, and the world around him is changing. And one of the things that I thought about right away with this book is the sort of parallel between what's happening in 1968 and what's happening now, what's been happening in the last couple of years in particular, in terms of our, as people in this country, in terms of things that are going on, coming back into sort of public awareness in a way that they perhaps hadn't for everybody. There are, racial justice has been an issue for lots of folks the entire time, but it hasn't been in the front of mind for everybody the entire time. And there's been more sort of, there's been more protest, more awareness, more outrage, due outrage, I think, that, does feel a little bit like 1968 in some ways. And so, I wonder if you could talk about what parallels maybe do and don't exist.
Yeah, it's not exactly the same world. It's a very interesting world. You have Donald Trump as president for a very long 4 years, and in that time, some really awful things have happened. With just our relationship with the rest of the world, with the environment, with the fatal flaw of the Republicans, which is when Eisenhower married the regular Republicans to the Dixiecrats. And it's still that marriage, but it's not a very, they're about to get divorced, and that's an interesting thing. Also, it's kind of wonderful when you look at, this is something that's different than 30 years ago. When you look at that more people voted than ever in the modern world. The modern, era of the United States. Everybody voted, regardless of who won. If everybody's getting out there and saying, I'm going to get involved in the system, I'm going to make things different. That's actually very wonderful. Another thing was, I was talking to a friend of mine, when Black Lives Matter was going on, and they were saying that, this is really, awful, this is really terrible. I don't know what's going to go on with the world. I don't know what's going to happen. And I was saying, well, yeah, it's pretty bad. However, I remember in 65, a little bit before 68, when there were riots in the streets of major cities, that the riots were mostly Black people, almost only Black people. And in this new thing, it's everybody, Black, white, yellow, brown. It's people from all over the world together saying, this is wrong, Now, when just one group says what you're doing to me is wrong, that's one, impact, and it had a lot of impact at the time. But when you get all these people together and say, no, this act is wrong. If you, sit on somebody's neck for, 9 minutes and kill him, or even if you didn't kill him, if you just do that to somebody, that's wrong. And it's worth stopping everything, and I think that 68, was an interesting, time for Easy, because the world was opening up. And of course, whenever the world opens up, there's more conflict. You would think, well, the world's open up, so everything's better. No, the world's open up, and all the internal struggles that people are having with each other, bubble out. So, but I can't make it exactly. I can't say, well, this exactly. They're the same, but there's a lot of political movement in America today. That every movement somebody loves, and that same movement somebody else hates. I was years ago, in 2008, when the economy failed, I was, and I still am a member of the board of The Nation, the magazine, The Nation, progressive magazine. And I came in, just as Bush was going out and Obama was coming in, and everybody was bailing out the banks and the insurance companies and and the airlines. And I came into the thing and I said, well, we need, and really the people on this board are really, really smart. They come from all the Ivy League colleges. They know everybody. They've done everything. They've written about everything. They can explain everything. I just said one thing at the very end. I said, look, we have to not let people bail out the banks. We should give everybody who's made an average of $40,000, every taxpayer who's made an average of $40,000 over the last 3 years needs to be given $40,000. Just do that. Instead of spending these trillions on the banks, just give it to the individual people, and they will bail out the banks. They will bail out the car companies. They will bail out the colleges, everything, right? Because if you send somebody a check for $40,000, they're more than likely going to put it in the bank, but it'll be their money in the bank, right? I said this, and nobody on the board agreed with me. Nobody. They all said, "Oh, no, that's wrong. We have to give it to the banks." I said, "But the bank stole the money," and they thought I was a crank saying the bank stole the money. But banks did steal the money. It was really obvious. I wasn't making it up. Now today, everybody agrees with me. I mean, nobody knows I said it all that long time.
They do now.
but everybody agrees with me, because yes, we need to bail people out. We need to send them the money. We need to help people, because if we give them that money goes back into the economy. It used to be if you gave capitalists money, it went back into the economy. But now with an international economy, come on, If you gave me $1 billion right now, I'd be a fool to invest in America. I could go to China, I could go to Brazil, I could go to Mexico, I could go to Vietnam. There's all kinds of places where you get more bang for your buck. So if you give money to these people, they're not going to invest it in America. But if you give money to the working class Americans, which is at least 70% of this country, then those people will make a difference, So, anyway, so that's what I think.
Universal basic income is now something that people talk about, for instance, which is a change from just that many years ago. For sure.
I know, it's just like, 12, 13 years ago, the people, and I'm like, I'm still mad about it, but, I shouldn't be. It's okay.
It is okay. But thank you for, I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's there is a lot of frustration to be had around a lot of this stuff. That actually brings me to an audience question about Easy.
Yeah.
Terry in our audience is asking if you can talk a little bit more about Easy's love-hate relationship with America.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. America, the country I love and hate. America, where you have a great opportunity to actually make something of yourself, to make something more than what you dreamed before, more than what your parents dreamed for you. And at the same time, it's a place that you could just fall through a hole in the ground and never be heard from again. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you're a woman in America, a child in America, a person of color in America, it's so possible to be extraordinarily successful or to fail miserably. And that failure is, you know, there's no safety net under it. Mm-hmm. You're 42 years old and you have, you know, a bout of schizophrenia or or some disease that you can't deal with, or just a multiple fracture in your leg. You could lose everything, you know, and there's no getting it back.
And with that, you know, we're Easy is a veteran, and that plays, you know, so he's fought for his country, ostensibly, or fought.
Yeah.
And he meets another veteran in the new book.
Yeah.
And so that sort of love-hate is certainly part of that, you know, sort of like recognizing, you know, what's wrong with America, especially if you are a Black man in it, or someone else who, you know, is not at the top of the lists in this country, and also, you know, going off and fighting. And so there's a veteran that he meets in the book, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, maybe what that relationship ends up sort of meaning for Easy, what that might bring up for him, and again, a little bit in terms of the parallel of his, you know, his past veteran experience and this experience set in the Vietnam War.
Yeah, as Easy's in World War II, his veterans in the Vietnamese War. You know, it's interesting to tell you a story about my father, my father's not easy, but, you know, pieces of him, you know, are. My father was in World War II, and he went over and, you know, I mean, you could fight if you were Black. You didn't really have to, or you didn't, you know, you may not have to. You could be doing other things. He was there with about 100 people from Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas, and you know, so 100 people go, and, you know, 89 of them come back. You know, some people died of a heart attack, some died of mistakes. You know, some, you know, got murdered by their own people. Some got killed in battle, but most came home. Almost everybody my father knew back home in Texas had been killed or severely wounded in some way or another. Mm-hmm. And he realized when he got back that his experience in the greatest war in history, he was safer in that experience than being at home in his own bed in Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas. Mm-hmm. And so Easy's experience, in a way, is a little better, you know, than the young veteran in Blood Grove, because that group of veterans nobody cared about. When you came back, you know, whether you have PTSD or not, it matters if your country loves you, if somebody goes out of their way to make your life work, if they help you out, you know, and what you have, you know, starting in Vietnam and still today, you know, the soldiers doing all kinds of things. You have soldiers who are in the army and on food stamps at the same time. I mean, it's so crazy, you know, how soldiers feel treated today. This soldier is a white guy, but Easy identifies with him because he's a veteran too, and he knows what it's like. He's seen a lot of people with PTSD. He's seen Germans with it. He almost killed one. He ended up not killing him, but it's an interesting relationship. He takes the case because he's white, you know, but he's a veteran, and I'm a veteran, and, you know, I identify with veterans, so I'm gonna try to help the kid out. He shouldn't. But he does. He tries.
Right. Well, and that's, you know, making the sort of big initial mistake is that, of course, you know, makes the reading very interesting as you proceed. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So the question of you mentioned earlier Easy's friends.
Mhm.
And how they're growing and changing as well. And this is partly specifically about this novel and about the series, but also more broadly a sort of a process question
Mhm.
about characters. I'm always really interested in how authors live with their characters, or how characters live with the authors, and when and how they are sort of with you, speaking to you, and if you have favorites, and if that maybe ebbs and flows, if there are people who sort of are like in your mind, on your heart at certain times, as you move through, and then how that might sort of come out when you write them the next time.
So what is the specific question? It's about characters and how
they live with you, right? Or if they do.
The character I love the most
Yeah.
is Leonard McGill's son, Twill. I just love that kid, and I do because I believe that um, Americans, the easiest way to make it in this capitalism dominated country, or capitalism dominated democracy, is that if you're a delayed adolescent, if you only believe in what's best for you and you don't care what's best for everybody else, you have to be a little bit of a sociopath in order to make it in American culture. Now, Mouse is a sociopath, but he's so deadly. I mean, he will kill you. If there's a way to kill, if you're against him, he will kill you. Like. And maybe one day that won't be true, but it's been true for him most of his life. And he's also 49. But Twill is, Twill will kill you if he absolutely has to. But, he's not going out of his way to kill anybody. But he is a kind of a sociopath. He doesn't listen to any law but the law of his heart. And he's a tough enough guy, but he loves his dad, and he loves his friends. He's the kind of guy that you really want to know. I mean, a lot of people want to vilify anybody who is of that ilk, but all of the people who run corporations in America are sociopaths. Half the policemen are sociopaths. It's like in order to actually make it, you have to only think about yourself. I love there's a documentary a long time ago called Pumping Iron. It was about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mm-hmm. And Arnold's father died, and he's working, for Mr. Universe and South Africa, I think. And, and his mother calls him and says, Arnold, I need you to come home. Your father has died. And he goes, oh, mother, that's really sad, but I can't really come home now. I'm just about to be this great thing. And he hangs up and he tells his assistant, he says, do not put through any more of her calls, because he was going to do this one thing. That is the way you make it in America. Listen, I loved his speech, after all the troubles that we've had, the attacking the White House and stuff like that. I mean the Capitol building. I like him, but I think he's a little sociopathic, in his ability to, make his wishes known in the world, So again, I mean, I went far afield for my characters, but Twill he's that perfect character,
No, I mean, that definitely gives some insight. Is it your point about a little bit of sociopathy being, required for American success is well taken. Yeah. And just because you're an American, because you grew up around this, in addition to sort of like what appeals to you about that character, is that actually easier to write than someone who, is maybe a little more altruistic?
It's more fun to write. I'm not sure if it's easier to write. Altruism is, it's a wonderful thing. And every once in a while I have a character, like for instance, Fearless Jones. Fearless Jones is, he's the most completely perfect human being. I mean, you have to love him. I write about him. I love him, and he he's really strong, and he's really single-minded. He's absolutely fearless, and that's a great thing. I mean, he's a great character, but. So I don't think it's hard to write about fearless either. I'm a little more interested in Twill, but just simply because he always surprises me and makes me laugh. Fearless always does what I expect him to do, but I love that too.
Mm. That what you just said is so interesting to me, and anytime I hear anything like it, just that your character surprises you, or not, right? Because there's just this. So I just picture the characters speaking to you. Like, obviously you're writing them, you've created them, you're writing the books, but it feels also a little bit like they exist.
Well,
next to you.
They do in a way. I mean, but the characters work the way that an actor who has become a character they're playing works. They'll do different things depending on what another actor will do. What something happens on set, some sound goes off in the theater, or on the set, or whatever. Your feeling is you're doing it, and as I'm writing it, that's happening. I'm not thinking that the character's talking to me. I'm not the character. I'm the writer. But I'm very close to how the character makes decisions and does things. When I'm writing in series, I learn things about E.Z. Rawlins in every book I write, and I've been writing about him, for these 15, 16 books, but I'm still learning about him. And when I'm writing in a novel, just in a solitary book, a one-off book, I'm loving my characters, and they do things, I know they do things I don't expect, because I didn't know where the ending was coming. I didn't know what the middle was doing. I didn't know when they opened the door, what person they were going to meet, It's a bigger thing than just, the character, talking to me, because, what are you going to say? They don't know either,
Right.
I mean, yeah.
And so that speaks to the other sort of writing question, which is, if you are outlining, planning things out, or if it's more, someone referred to it as organic recently, we've traditionally made the pantser versus plotter distinction. Do you want to speak to where you fall on that kind of spectrum?
I really think it's a combination of things. I mean, that you might say, okay, I'm going to write this book, and maybe you have a deadline, so you would like to know where you're going, and you write an outline the way I write outlines. Some people write like 300-page outlines, but I just write one. Easy comes back from a case, they didn't pay him. 2, his partners are gone, and he wishes his assistant wasn't there, so he sends her off on a retreat to the TM. 3, a young white war veteran comes into his office and has a kind of a breakdown in front of Easy. And I keep writing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I get to about 50, and I say, okay, that's enough. That's a novel, and I'll start writing. Now, of course, as I'm writing, things are changing. Things are becoming different. Things are, they're going here, they're going there. New characters come in. He walks into a bar, he meets somebody who we didn't expect. That person actually has something to do later on in the story that you didn't know, because you didn't know he was going to be there in the first place. But you kind of set up a structure. So the idea of saying that you're doing one or the other is usually, I mean, sometimes people just, write automatically, and they get to the end of a story, and it's a good enough story that if they rewrite it a few times, it's a novel. That's good. Gloria Naylor was like that. Gloria Naylor, she didn't rewrite at all. At least that's what she told me. I don't know, maybe she was telling me the truth, but it sounded like she was telling me the truth.
That's an amazing piece of inside information. Thank you for that. Yeah, wow. So that brings us to another audience question. Someone is asking about whether or not there are any characters that have maybe come up during the pandemic in particular who are sort of percolating with you for future projects.
I started writing a couple of things about, future pandemic situations. It's so interesting. The pandemic. I was talking to a friend of mine in Los Angeles, and she was telling me that, we're in some way you could look to say that we're really worldwide lucky with this pandemic because, it's a flu-like pandemic. It's not Ebola, right? Like if you had like all of a sudden an airborne Ebola, that really would be, I don't know, would be, I mean, I can't even imagine how terrible that would be. However, the people who have spent so much time working on it, dealing with it now, like are saying, yeah, this is how we need to deal with it. And we like at the end of this one, at least in America, we now actually know how to deal with it. And it's that herd, thing that they're talking about. We have herd knowledge about how you deal with this stuff now that we didn't have before. It makes me kind of, I mean, you can be optimistic or you can be pessimistic, and really, if we had, airborne Ebola, I would be pessimistic, but we don't. And so when and if anything like that happens, we can deal with it. So I've been writing things about, thinking about that, just, well, how would they be? How would we be? What would happen? How does the world work? How do people use things like the pandemic politically, which becomes, really interesting. What do they lie to us about? What are they not, what are they not telling us? Or what are they not even telling themselves? What is, I mean, it's always a question for humans. What is truth? And it's hard to tell what it is, but I haven't gone very far with it, partially because, I think so many people are going to be working on it. Why do I need, to do that? I mean, and, partially because it's not completely clear to me yet.
Well, and we are still in it, it's not,
I guess
to a large degree, but
we are completely in it. However, it does feel, like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I personally have had my, the vaccine, and that feels, it feels good. It's good for me, but it's also good, for people around me, and I'm feeling pretty. I'm feeling more confident, less overwhelmed by it, and somehow because there's a light at the end of the tunnel, people seem to be feeling more responsible, which is interesting. I mean, I don't know why that is, but
I hope that's true. I appreciate you saying that. I hope that's true. Just a little bit, we were having a conversation before we started about how, it feels like it probably is just a little bit longer that we all need to continue being responsible and safe and caring for, and really thinking in terms of caring for ourselves and also just for one another. And, then we can come out on the other side. Fight some of that sociopathic tendency that, that the world tells us is a good thing. Absolutely. So I wonder if you would talk a little bit about, this is not a question on plan, but you talked about your short stories, the Awkward Black Man, and I do appreciate, and I encourage other people to pick that up as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, or maybe if there's a character there that really jumps out in this moment for you about how we are when it comes to the images we have of Black men in particular, and what you were trying to do with that book in terms of expanding people's thinking and
it's such an interesting question because I mean, there are a lot of characters in my book who are idealistic. A character who gets into a big argument with a woman who wants to give him a job because he's Black, but she says, "Well, you're African American." He says, "Wait, what do you mean African American? Are Italians Euro Americans? Are the English? you know, Euro-Americans. I mean, you know, I mean, what? You know, there's a Franco-American, Anglo-American, you know, and if he's, you know, from Namibia, then he would be, you know, that's what he would be. He'd be from that country, you know, or from Ethiopia, then that's what he would be. He'd be from that country. That's how those things work. They, you know, call him an African-American. He's crazy. Of course, he's saying it, him saying it means he's not going to get his job. That's, you know, one of the regular kind of, kind of socially pretty realistic stories. I have another story where a guy who's, you know, been an entrepreneur of hip hop music gets hired by a company that has learned how to grow bodies exactly like the old body when it was younger. And now there's a woman who's created a biocomputer which can actually read the impulses from a brain. And so here's a guy, he's not a scientist, but he's Black and he knows how to sell things. And so he buys the computer company, he develops it, he uses these genetic things, he's growing people, and he's convincing people that if you grow a copy of yourself and you copy the memories back and forth, that at one point, these two entities, the really old entity and the young entity, are thinking exactly the same things. And so allowing the older entity to die is not so terrible, you know? And he gets sent to prison for it. But within 20 years, everybody in the world is doing it, you know? The problem isn't, of course, cloning people, which our people always think, but the problem is that the computers that hold the memories and move them back and forth become entities that can think as well as we can and become a different species. And so there's like, you know, a world war between species. In some ways, you know, my character who doesn't, you know, who is doesn't want to be called an African American, and who wants to the world to recognize what he sees as truth. In some ways, that's something the awkward Black man is. And the other one is this guy who's actually really good at creating the right structure to change the world into something that it had no idea that it could be. You know, that those are two of the 17 awkward Black men that I have. And I think that so it's, for me, it's so interesting, you know, because I know how much, you know, people are involved in the world that other people don't want to see. They say, well, I want to see a face. Jesus is white, you know, God is white. The dominant part of the species is the male. You know, there's all these things that we think that are not true. You know, and they're less and less true all the time. You know, the dead hand of the past. You know, and so in writing about the awkward Black man, I'm writing about all of America or all of the world in a way, seen through the eyes of somebody who has a different take on the world.
And I think what you're also doing is pushing back against this idea that any group of people, however they're identified, as a monolith, and in particular, Black folks, Black men, you know, that have all been sort of painted with a broad brush as it, throughout our history. So that's, right, just appreciate that. So I will get back to Blood Grove a little bit.
Okay.
And Easy Rawlins. And you just mentioned, and have mentioned a couple times, women and, you know, the sort of some of the misogyny that, you know, lives in the world. And, and you write women characters, and in particular, sort of femme fatale characters as well. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit about about that and how you approach that. And this may be one of those questions that you get a lot, but I know that it is whenever you're having to write something that's outside your experience that way,
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to hear how you approach that.
It's interesting thinking about that, because there are a few femme fatale like women in the new book, though there's really only one, one and a half maybe. Lola might be half of one, but there are a lot of other women in it too. There's Lynn, the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong woman who's come to America. There's Etta Mae Harris. There's Jackson Blue's wife, who she's a major business person. There's all kinds of women, and it's in it. And I know that it's easy when you look at a genre book to look at the genre characters, and I certainly have them. And I really I enjoy them. Kind of in the end. You don't really there are bad people and there are good people, but a lot of the good people are not, you don't like, and a lot of bad people you think are great. Easy gets in between, major gangsters. So I try my best to create characters who actually live in the time, a lot of times, you say you'll be writing about somebody in 1969 and say, well, do you have to have them smoking? I said, well, it is 1969. How am I going to not have them smoking? Well, we don't want people to smoke. And I said, okay, that's good. You don't want people to smoke, but I'm writing a novel about 1969. So nobody smokes, nobody drinks. What world is that? To talk about, a woman, one of the women characters who's very, very deadly. Easy finds her. He goes to the front door. He knocks on the door, and she opens it. And Easy's just amazed. He said, she's a woman. She's, half his size. She knows that people are after her, but she's not afraid. The same thing with, he goes to find a guy who's dying. And his mother is there taking care of him, protecting him. She has his knife, and she just opens the door and lets Easy in, because, she understands that if this man came after her, she would have to do her best to kill him, because there's no just subduing him, And Easy understands. He says, this makes her much more dangerous than somebody twice my size, because it does depend on how much of your heart you can put into the fight. I think that talking about those things is interesting, and it's fun, and it's not necessarily political in a direct sense. Like, don't smoke that cigarette, and then some kid won't read the book and think Easy's cool and smoke that cigarette. Easy smokes one cigarette a day now. He wants to quit. He just can't quite quit. I know I'm not just talking about women, but I think that the women. There are a lot of women in this book, and they're very, very different people. Some of them are very trustworthy. Some of them are not. Some of them are purely emotional. But some of the people are too. Nobody's as cowardly in any of my books as Jackson Blue. Jackson's scared of everything. Maybe Paris Mann. But so what? It doesn't. What matters is where we're coming from. Because if you don't understand where we're coming from, then you don't understand where we're going. It's an impossibility.
I'll ask one more audience question, since we're back on characters a little bit, and are coming to the end of our hour actually already as well. And thank you. It's been great to talk to you. And Terry's asking, this is sort of a great question. How will Mouse change from his new reading habits? You mentioned the reading habits.
So interesting. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Will he just join some kind of underground Because I've already made up an underground Black, Black Panthers like organization in the Bay Area a book or so ago. Will he join those guys? Um, will will he will he become politicized? Uh, or I don't know. Like, real honestly, I just don't know. I mean, it's a good question, and it's not one I've thought about because I just have him start reading, in this book. Will I mean, the documentary. Yeah, I love Ken Burns's work. I mean, the documentary on Vietnam wasn't as important to me because I think I already knew a lot of things, because I had lived through that period of time. But one of the things that was so interesting about it was the Ho Chi Minh Trail got blown up every day by bombers, and it got rebuilt every night by Vietnamese and Viet Cong. Uh, I mean, they're kind of soldiers, but really, I mean, they're more like engineers. Every night with shovels, they're out there. And it was men and women, I mean, we're kind of equally men and women. I was watching it and I'd never seen it back then. And you think, wow, and so what will Mouse think about that? Because, his new love relationship plus reading might change him in ways that, nobody would ever even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Which is great about all characters.
Right. Yeah. And that reading in particular,
in a bookstore, certainly.
Right. And in a book, that because it can be this huge catalyst for personal and much broader change as well. The written word is so powerful. And it doesn't, and you don't just find power in like some specifically political treatise necessarily either,
No, it's true. It really is true. You're always going to have your heroes, in communism, socialism, anarchy. I mean, all these people, they're, Emma Goldman, like she was everywhere. When you start to read things, because Emma Goldman was everywhere, and it's really interesting, Bakunin, Marx, and Stalin, kind of, I don't know. We have a world of personality, which is why novels are so important, because novels are about the psyche.
Mm-hmm. And novels put us inside experience.
Yeah.
In a real way.
Allow us to imagine it in a way that maybe in everyday life we'd never be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and your novels certainly do that. Your short stories as well. And you've also, of course, written about writing. It's worth mentioning. And so with that, I wonder if we could end on, if you do have any suggestions or anything that you're reading or have read recently that you feel like folks should read.
That's so interesting.
And if not, that's okay, because I realize I didn't ask ahead of time.
The smartest thing to answer, the way to answer that question is to say, read what you love, whatever that is, whatever it's ever been. Read what you love. If it was Winnie the Pooh, if it was 100 Years of Solitude, if it was Nancy Drew and the Purloined whatever, I mean, I've been reading a lot of Marquez lately. Just really interested in a life that, based in a land that, South America is so different than North America. And, you have these, you have people living lives that are influenced by class and culture and race, but not in the same ways that they are, here, one, because, capitalism didn't really grab hold internally until much later. The General in His Labyrinth, 100 Years of Solitude. I mean, I find them like, really, they're extraordinary. They're extraordinary novels. Trying to get at, the heart of who we are.
Thank you for that. We'll end on that recommendation to Rica Garcia Marquez. And because we're at the end of the hour, and it's, again, been wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for giving me a platform, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you can tell, like, I mean, I want people to buy my books, but I never like selling them. You know, I mean, it's like, I'll talk about a book, but, you know, I'll talk about anything, you know.
I get that. And I'll just say, I've probably used too many I statements tonight, but I'll just say that I feel for authors in that added part of the job, right? Like, it's not enough for you to write the novel, you also got to go out and sell it. And we're here to help you do that. Obviously, we want to sell books. We want to get your books into people's hands. But I also really appreciate just hearing more from you, and you know, getting some thoughts on other things as well. In addition to actively encouraging folks to buy Blood Grove, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Buy Blood Grove.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Walter. It's really been a pleasure.
It's wonderful to be here, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us from Atlanta. Thanks again to everyone who's joined us this evening from wherever you are, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Please stay safe and stay well, and continue to be careful until we're through the whole thing.
All right.
Pandemic. All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.